You're listening to The Office on the Live Drive. My name is Kola Wole Falodun. And of course, you know this is brought to you by CIPM and Lagos Talks 91.3. Our guest is still here with us, Dr. Sabastine Okeke Nwajide, FCIPM and founder CEO, Masterminds HRSG Consultant. He is a certified educationist, trainer, and author with a very strong academic background, including a PhD from NCU, Florida, in the U.S. He has held various leadership roles, including CEO of Masterminds HRSG Consulting, and also serves on several boards and committees, both internationally and nationally. He is a certified financial consultant, business edge trainer, and associate member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators in the UK. He has published articles in professional magazines and journals and is a sought-after speaker and mentor. Additionally, he is a pastor with the Redeemed Christian Church of God, RCCG, and chairman of the board of Every Home for Christ Nigeria. He is married as well with 4 children. Our guest this evening on The Office, it goes by the name Sabastine Okeke Nwajide. FCIPM is Dr. Sabastine, I must say, founder, CEO, Masterminds HRSG Consulting. Good to have you join us. Sir, how are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing good and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
All right, so let's get talking because of our time. We are going to be talking about leadership. Well, leading a high-performing team. So I know this is your field, so you deal with teams in human resources, all about getting the team together to be in line with the goals of the organization and all of that. Now, leading a high-performing team is very key, and that is what perhaps a lot of entrepreneurs who hire the services of HR experts would expect. We'll talk about the do's and the don'ts generally when you are tasked with leading a high-performing team, a team that gets the job done. And our first question is this: what characteristics define a high-performing team?
Thank you so very much. So just from the way you've said it, the first and the most important characteristic is that this team performs. They just get the job done. And not only that they get the job done, they get it done very well, on time, with value, with intent, and they deliver clarity and on purpose, measurability. In other words, so they don't deliver what you can track. You can track everything. And they also meet and surpass expectations. So that is what it's all about. This team is unique. The makeup, the configuration, the deliveries are just clear. And so it's so clear that when you talk about high-performing team, you must determine the fact that this team performs. That's number one. Number two, they don't just perform. Like I said, they also perform by exceeding expectations. So they are an unusual bunch of performers and very rare.
Very rare. So let me begin from leaders now within the mix, right? They have peculiarities in terms of their behavior. People are different. So what leadership behaviors would you say could potentially hinder a high-performing team from achieving success?
Very vital and very important question. So remember, the composition of the team is tailored towards specific objectives in terms of scope of work and deliverables. And they're also made up of different unique characteristics and traits. That's the team composition itself. Now, so what would a leader do? So leaders can either attract performance or frustrate performance. Okay, that's 2 things. Now, most times you expect that the natural leader should attract people that deliver performance and is able to provide a very good environment for them to keep delivering. So there are traits that could hinder this from happening. One of the most dangerous traits is where the leader manages by competing with his team.
Competing, is that a common thing?
Yeah, it happens. I mean, you feel that some of your team members are pretty more on a fast track than you are. And then because you still want to keep your chair, you feel like frustrating them from speeding up. So you come up with all kinds of limitations, all kinds of hindrances, hurdles, and blocks just to make them look as if they're not performing. We've had examples like that. Now, so the first thing is the leader himself. Does he want performance? Does he want people to perform expressly? Or does he see performance as a check on his own ability to perform? In other words, does he see that the performance of his team members can be a threat to him retaining his chair? That is one thing. Another thing again that you see that could be a hindrance is where the leader himself doesn't seem to know what leadership is all about. He doesn't have the traits of a good leader. Now, when you are a leader and you're a natural leader, one of the greatest virtues for you is ability to make others to become leaders. Okay? So when you don't have that, what it takes to be a leader, and you find yourself in leadership position, you're going to struggle. When you struggle with it, you probably won't deliver that. So, I mean, just forgive my digression a bit on this. Look at football. Look at the fact that some players are natural talent. Some have to work so hard to deliver on that. And there are two global players that you can mention in that space. Now, you now discover that most times, the natural players just get the job done. Like a natural teacher. He comes to class and things just begin to happen. The other party can also teach, but needs to do a lot more work to get things happen. Effort there. So, in other words, when you see the natural leader, he doesn't often push too many things, but everything moves. Everything moves.
Some people are born that way.
Yeah.
And some have to train themselves.
And some to train themselves that way. Yeah, correct. I agree. So, in other words, the fact that there are people who are naturally designed for that role, some also attain that by virtue of effort, work. But the balance is that when you see a natural leader who is committed to leadership, he naturally will bring up people without difficulty. Not without effort, but without difficulty. Okay. But if you see the guy who probably has to put in more work, so he's able to dispense based on what he gets. So I've gotten this, I dispense that. So he's like a dispenser. He dispenses based on the refilling. So the refilling must happen every time before he can keep dispensing. When the refill bottle is empty, he has nothing else to give. So you have instances like that. Okay. And so, like I said, the first box is, are you competing with your team members, or are you encouraging them to keep delivering? Second box, do you have what it takes to be the leader?
So a quick question now. Are these things mutually exclusive? The ability to get the team performing excellently without necessarily getting to a point where they look like the main characters in the play? From a leader's perspective now, like you mentioned, there's some certain levels of proficiency where you get to. It seems like the people you are leading are beginning to become the major players or beginning to take the major roles or characters within the space. So is it possible to get the team performing at that level without necessarily jeopardizing your position within the team?
Absolutely. That is what makes you the leader in the first instance. Remember, leadership doesn't stop when performance ends or when the job is done. In fact, there's leadership before the job is done. There's leadership while the job is being done and after the job is done. So when your team has come to that point where the team is exceptional, that is your star. That is your crown. I get it. Now you become a super leader. I get it, because you're now beginning to play in the role of being a mentor and being a coach at a higher level. So it doesn't stop because you have raised champions. It continues because those champions still need you for the rest of the journey. But you must be able to make yourself relevant to that rest of the journey by constantly upskilling yourself, updating your capacity, and being able to deliver exceptional leadership.
Okay, let's talk about culture now. Team culture, workplace culture generally, or team culture.
Yes.
How can leaders foster an excellent team culture that could guarantee or that could encourage high performance at every level?
So culture is actually domiciled within the structure of organizations. Okay, so oftentimes you can't easily copy-paste culture. Copy from one place and place it somewhere else. It might not deliver. But if you generate culture because you engage with the uniqueness of your own work environment and the organizational structure, then culture will become natural, become like a way of life. Remember, culture is firstly a way of life. So people's culture, so if I learn a different culture, I will learn to connect with that culture. But if this culture is within the domain of my mix, then it works naturally for me. Again, in terms of hiring people, it's often possible, and we have seen that play out, you can hire people that naturally plug into your culture space.
Okay.
Yes, from the point of engagement, because you already know what you're looking for, and you bring what you're looking for.
So I presume that makes the job easier. I mean, get the job done, get people who are in line with the culture already from the recruitment level.
Yes, sure.
But in a case where you have people, maybe you just joined as an HR expert afterwards, so you met a team there that is maybe somewhat dysfunctional in that regard. How do you go about
enabling
a good culture?
Excellent question. Now, you see, that is why we have professional processes of emerging and evolving HR practitioners. All right. You go through a professional program that enables you to be connected. And it's not just about passing the exam. It's also about being mentored, being coached, being led, being coordinated, and all those things work to deliver that level of capacity. I get it. So when you are onboarded in an organization that already has the people in the organization, you can also have a zone where the organization by itself decides to change its culture.
Okay.
You know what? We met a culture. We've worked with it. We have people into it. Now we want to change the way we operate. That's another responsibility. So either way, firstly is to distill what is this culture. And remember the set theorem. The set theorem, you have the universal set, you have the this union of sets and subsets. Now, the universal set is what is common to everyone in the organization. Wherever you are part of this. We have subset that sits within the domain of various functions, departments, or units, whatever. But remember that everything is still onboarded within the universal set. You now have the small boxes that represent those subsets. Yeah, correct, subset. Now, so if the organization already has people and they worked in different ways, or even bringing people from different points who already are used to different ways of doing things before they showed up in your organization, the first thing you need to do is, what is work for us here? You must know what it is. What are the values we represent here? What do we do here? How do we speak? How do we relate? How do we engage? So you must distill that. Everybody must know what it is. Then we go through a process of onboarding people into those values. I get it. Okay. Now, the difficult part, which is very interesting, is that I have worked in an organization, we will not mention their name, that believes that it's difficult to change what people are used to.
Okay.
That investing in an attempt to change someone's lifestyle, the person can only modify his behavior, but he will never become what they are looking for in a natural sense. He wants to smile the way you want him to smile, but that's not who he is. All right? So while he's in your space, he tries to behave like one of us. But when he leaves your space, he goes back to who he is.
How can leaders or organizations have a situation where conflicts, they're bound to happen anyway, but how can we ensure that we resolve conflicts without jeopardizing performance in the process?
Beautiful. So in practice, you can't escape conflicts. It's just there. And some of these conflicts could be conflicts of interest, which is the most dangerous of it. Every other conflict is not difficult. The conflict of interest is very dangerous because someone is trying to take advantage of the system in order to project his or her own personal benefit. All right. So, which is a different level of conflict. But what conflicts, I don't agree with you, it doesn't look like my appraisal, those ones will happen. So when you have a lawless place, everybody will do what seems right in their own eyes. So you must start where the box should start. And that starts is, what are the governance practices here? That is G. Then we have the second one, which are the risk practices. Listen, for every conflict point, we need to measure what are the risk factors here. What we start to gain or lose if this conflict is allowed to drag or is quenched on time or whatever. So what are the risk components? The third one is compliance. It's called the GRC. Governance, risk, and compliance. The third is compliance. Compliance means in alignment with policy. Is anyone complying with policy? So if there are two parties who are saying, I don't like this, I don't like it, the first question you decipher is, so who amongst the two is in compliance with the law? So you know that we have a practice, we have a guide here, we have an HR guide or whatever practice they have in organization that says the way things should be done. So if someone is in compliance and the other one is not in compliance, then we're not talking about conflicts here. It's just a different ball game. So firstly, what are the governance practices here? How do we operate as a people? It helps to decipher how to manage conflicts. And then what are the risk components? And finally, what are the compliance requirements?
Okay, so when hiring a team, putting together a team of any sort, when hiring a manager or a team lead to lead that team, to get the team performing at a high level,
yes.
What qualities should these sort of people possess?
The leaders?
Yeah, the leaders.
Oh, great. The first thing I've mentioned earlier, again from practice, they must know what the work is. See, and they must love people. They must love people. they must be ready to lead, and they must have gained leadership capability with time. I get it. They must have gained leadership capability with time. They must have been properly delivered through the furnace of life and experience. Very fundamental. That doesn't mean that a young person cannot be a leader. Of course, he can be. But again, it depends on complexities of leadership roles. You must also understand that leadership can also be handled. Leadership competencies are also products of understanding the complexities of roles and responsibilities. So firstly, is he aware of what the work is? Because remember, this is work environment. Because we're not talking about leadership in the home, it's in the work. So in the workplace, does he know about the job? Does he have the natural traits? Again, I come back to natural traits. Natural traits is very helpful because it positions you in a way that you understand that this is my responsibility as a leader to provide direction. Does he know where he's going? All right. Is he a smart leader? He applies the principles of smart leadership. Okay. Which means that, number one, his approach to matters are very simple. It's not complicated. And the timelines of his performances and all he's expecting you to do is measurable. And what he's asking you to do and what he's promising to do as a leader is attainable. And they are also very realistic. And is able to provide all of that within reasonable time. Because if leadership can be delivered within a time frame, then it's a waste of everybody's time.
Okay.
So smart leadership must play strong role here. Okay. And of all of that, it's important that you're also able to be sure that you are measuring the impact of your leadership. So that boils down to the appraisal process of high-performing teams. Remember, the high-performing teams are driven by a very high-intensive appraisal system. The leader himself or herself must also connect with that and being sure that everything is done within the agreed timeline.
Okay, so let me also put this. You mentioned something about when we're talking about culture, team culture and workplace culture, and the universal set and subset, and how some people have their ways in a way cast in stone.
Yeah,
you can't really change them.
Yeah.
You can try to modify them a bit. Could that be a reason why some organizations prefer to hire young people? So there's this age thing when it comes to recruitment. So don't be more than this age. Is that a reason why?
To some extent,
do that?
yes. To some extent, yeah. Because there's a saying in some culture that a dry fish is difficult to bend.
Okay.
That if you want to bend a dry fish, you got to break the fish. But the fresh fish, you can actually bend it, turn it different sides, and still get it. So you now see organizations that want to hire younger people because they've not yet been submerged into multiple dimensions of different cultural traits. They are pretty fresh from school. They are in a position where you can make them become what you want them to be. Okay, but if they've gone through 1, 2, 3 organizations and they show up in your place, they'll be struggling with what I've seen somewhere else, what I'm seeing here. How can I connect to that? And they have to add to them, and they might have built their life around what they had seen before. And you now show up and say, this is what you want to do. So it's a difficult trajectory for some of them.
Is it not possible to determine that, just throw it open and say, okay, regardless of your age, just come in for the recruitment process. And if we think that you can fit into our system, then you get a job. As against possible. Limiting it to younger people.
It's also possible, building from experience, you now discover that from experience, the more mature ones are pretty more preformed.
Okay.
Yes, and when you are preformed, you've defined a lot of things. Way of life. This has happened to you. You formed your opinion about different places. You've been hurt. You've been taken advantage of. You've been through a lot. And they have those things you've been through in some way are begin to define the way you react to things. So unlike a younger person who probably has not been through some of those things within the work setting, not through life, but work setting, is pretty more amenable to give you room for trust. So what trust as a currency is pretty more predominantly available with the younger ones than the older ones. They can trust the system more. They can take chances and they can do a lot. Unlike the older ones who, I've seen this before. This has happened to me before. This is looking like what I've suffered before. I'm not going to suffer it again. So there's resistance, even when the intention wasn't to harm
to harm anyone.
Yeah, but the younger ones have seen little to not much of those things, so they can trust more. So in terms of trust as a currency within the place of work, you now discover that the younger ones tend to have more of it.
But isn't there a trade-off? You know, you trade off experience and, I don't know, pretty much experience in a way for people who are moldable.
Oh, great. I mean, so remember, for certain roles and certain hierarchy of roles, it will be important to bring in people who already have garnered some measure of experience to provide coordinated leadership and performance as well. That is possible. So, yes, there might be one or two rooms for trade-off to say, okay, I don't want to align with this because I want to deliver on this. I don't want to do it because so those trade-offs are all part of the mix. But balance. But again, it depends on what is at what point do you say we have a balance here?
Okay. Okay, our time is up. We need to wrap it up at this point in time. I was going to ask you about how we could adapt, if we can do it in like 30 seconds. In terms of periods of difficulties and adaptations, how can leaders maneuver such murky waters? Especially now, like in Nigeria, we're going through a lot of things in terms of the economy. Many companies are downsizing, adjusting, cutting costs. How can leaders help to steady the waters during this very tough period?
The mix of the leader matters. If he has a sense of security, a sense of responsibility, a duty to build a team and to keep his team together despite the storms. You know, so that is where you see the captain on the vessel as against the downfall driver. The downfall driver can abandon his downfall and run away for his life. But the captain will not often abandon his ship, no matter what.
Okay.
So he galvanizes the team. Let's make it happen. Let's deliver. It's tough time, but tough time doesn't last. Tough people will last. Let's be tough for this season. We'll make it happen. So it depends on who the leader is. That's where the traits of leadership differentiates.